Hello, welcome to Boardgame TV, and we are on part 4 and of the final episode of the first series of the Ghost Rider comic book. Now this series will last from issue 67 to 81. Ghost Rider would get cancelled in 1983 with issue 81. This will be the last run on the Ghost Rider for a series. However, as short-lived as this run is, it's probably one of the most significant and important runs, and it's also personally my favorite run of the first series. I consider it to be the best run, and because so many important things happen in this that carry over to the next series, and because it's a very good run. So much happens in such little time. At the beginning of this run, the writing was kind of on the wall. Ghost Rider had kind of dipped in sales, but back then, for a book to be canceled was a real letdown. It was a point of honor not to have a book canceled, whereas nowadays books get canceled left and right and then rebooted and stuff like that. But back in the 80s, it was they tried their best to bring even the smallest books to not get canceled, and they really made a last-ditch effort with this run to not have the book canceled, but it didn't work out like that. This run feels like I like to compare it to an opera, a crescendo. It just keeps going and going, and the tension keeps building and building and building and building, and then the crescendo abruptly ends, but in a good way. Well, let's go ahead and get started with this. So issue 67 is basically a filler issue written by JMD Mattis where nothing really of importance happens. However, 68 begins Roger Stern's run on the Ghost Rider. And Roger Stern is, famous in Marvel. Especially, I really like his work with Spider-Man. And he would take the realms of this book from issues 68 to 73, with taking a break on issue 71. And if you are a fan of the Ghost Rider or want to get into Ghost Rider, issue 68 is a real good starting point. If you can't afford to get the whole collection or get a whole bunch of back issues, 68 is a retelling of Johnny Blaze's origin. And from 68 onward to 81, you could basically, if you didn't have the money, just get those issues and get the gist of the whole first series of Ghost Rider and get prepared for the second series of Ghost Rider. And 68 is a wonderful issue, and right off the bat, you know that Roger Stern and company got special things prepared for his run on this, and that they really tried. It's one of my favorite issues of all time in Ghost Rider, even though it's an origin story retelling, which is weird because usually when you retell origins, it's like you just flip through it. And the basic gist of the issue is that Johnny Blaze, on a dark and stormy night, walks into a church and goes into the confessional booth and confesses his sins to the priest that's in there. And of course he retells his whole origin and how he became Ghost Rider and how he's been dealing with it and stuff like that to the priest. Of course, the whole time the priest doesn't really believe that Johnny Blaze turns into a demon or anything like that, and he's really just trying to get Johnny out of there. But right after Johnny gets done telling his story, he tells the priest one last little thing. He says, a couple hours ago, out in on the side of the road in a ditch, I met the dying. I found the dying priest of this church, and he told me that he'd been robbed and left for dead here in this ditch by someone who then took his Cossack and was gonna, or whatever that collar thing is, and impersonate him. And at that point in time, you see our fake priest in there start to sweat, and there's a great illustration of right before Johnny Blaze. He says, "So when I found the priest and he told me what happened, I knew what I had to do." And so you see the skeletal arm of Ghost Rider come through the confessional and grab the priest, and it's just such a great, striking image. And it's just, that's a memorable issue. I'll just leave it at that. Also, beginning his run of art is Bob Budinsky. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. Now, Tom Sutton would do issue 67. Bob would start in on issue 68, and then Don Perlin would make a return and fill in on issue 71 and 76. But Bob would do the bulk of the series from here on out. And Bob's art is the best in the entire series of Ghost Rider, in my opinion. His art is clean, crisp, and he just draws a flaming skull like nobody's business. He is my favorite artist on this book up to this point. I like Don Perlin. I think Don Perlin did a fabulous job, but Bob's is fantastic. I would put his art as great, and his style fits really well with the tone of the book, and the tone that they're taking with this book from this point on. And so he definitely goes down in annals as one of my favorite all-time illustrators of Ghost Rider. We get a lot of stuff in this run. We get an expansion, basically a continuation a little bit of what Michael Fleischer started. Johnny Blaze still stays at the Quentin Carnival, but we get more of the Quentin Carnival. We get more backstories of the people there, more interaction with the people there. We get more of the conflict between Johnny Blaze and the Ghost Rider, and it even pushes the conflict further. And making their long-awaited return in this run is Roxanne and the Devil, at this time being called Mephisto. And basically, we get the origin of the demon, and now you're looking at it right there, and his name is Zarathos. And it's a pretty good origin, and we finally get an understanding of what makes the demon tick, why the demon's like he is, and a lot about his personality. And basically, the gist of it is that a long time ago, Zarathos was a kind of like a minor god or demigod type persona. And the more that he was worshipped, the more powerful he became. And a bunch of, you want to call them Aztecs or Mayans, found the skeletal remains of him in some caverns, and then they began worshiping and venerating him, which the flame brought him to life. And he would demand sacrifices and stuff, and he would sear their souls like he does as Ghost Rider. Well, eventually he got the attention of Mephisto because he was starting to gain in power. Now, Mephisto, not one to just outright go ahead and fight the guy, came up with a plan to take down Zarathos. There was this young Mayan or Aztecan couple that was in love. However, Zarathos' servants captured the lady and took her back to their great pyramid that they had where they worshipped Zarathos. Well, this guy could not beat Zarathos, and he couldn't beat any of his worshippers. So he called whoever gods that would answer for him to be able to rescue his beloved. Of course, Mephisto answers, and Mephisto took his soul, but left him remaining. And this is very important because it's going to set up a weakness of Zarathos and what happens. So the lover with no soul climbs the top of the pyramid and confronts Zarathos. And of course Zarathos is like, this is an arrogant human, I'm going to just feed off his soul real quick and everything like that. And he does this in front of all of his worshippers. Well, he goes to grab the guy and feed his soul, but the guy has no soul to feed on. And it causes a moment of weakness and doubt in the worshippers and in Zarathos. And at that point in time, Mephisto springs forth and battles Zarathos and beats him and imprisons the living fire, which is Zarathos' essence, in the soul crystal. Of course, the man, he can't love anymore. He can't feel any type of emotion. He saved his lady love, but he can't be with her. He just basically wanders off to roam the world in eternal loneliness from here on out. That man would become Centurious. And this is another big important thing to remember, because this will play out. Like I said, a lot of important stuff happens in this series here. So that we find out is the origin of Zarathos. And he's been imprisoned in the soul crystal ever since. And from time to time, people who really displease Mephisto or go back on the word, he'll throw Zarathos' essence in those people, and eventually they'll burn out and die, and Zarathos will be imprisoned again back in the soul crystal. Of course, every time he does this, Zarathos does not remember who he is or what he was or anything like that. So it's kind of like an eternal cycle of torment for Zarathos. But this run is probably the most important, the best drawn, and the best written storyline of the first series of Ghost Rider. Now, Roger Stern would leave on issue 73, and J.M. DeMatteis would take his place. Now, J.M. DeMatteis also did issue 71, which was kind of a filler issue, but J.M. DeMatteis would take over 74 and write it to the end at issue 81. And J.M. DeMatteis basically is doing the same thing that Roger Stern set up to do. There's really no change in tone or style from the writing. It's almost basically the same, and it's like they both really plan out what to do. Roger would start, J.M. would finish. And so there's no abrupt direct transition. It's a smooth thing, and both equally had the same ideas. So during this time, we also, besides learning Zarathos' origin, having Roxanne return, learning about the soul crystal, learning about Zarathos' personality, we also get to see firsthand what the soul-burning hellfire does when Ghost Rider burns people's souls. You get to see into their subconscious as to how they feel and what kind of state it puts them in. And that brings about some very interesting stuff. And Johnny Blaze, you start to feel Johnny Blaze's pain as to what he does to people, because he sees what he does to people. You also get to see a lot of where Johnny Blaze goes when the Ghost Rider takes over. They like share a subconscious type realm where the Ghost Rider is in Johnny Blaze's subconscious when Johnny Blaze is in control, and then when Ghost Rider takes control, Johnny Blaze switches back and goes back to that subconscious realm, and it's just it's pretty neat, interesting to see how that goes. As for villains in this run, we get the Circus of Crime, Steelwind, who will be important, and we'll remember for the next series. Of course, Centurious, Mephisto, Nightmare makes his first appearance here with Ghost Rider, and he will of course appear in the next series as well. He's the one who gives, who lets Zarathos find out his origins. Freakmaster and the Sin Eater, and the Sin Eater will be important too. And basically, and the town of Holly. The town of Holly will be important as well. So basically, I just want to go over each issue to explain kind of what happens, since a lot of important stuff goes on like that. So like I said, issue 67 is really a filler issue. Nothing much happens there. Johnny just meets a family, gets involved in some kind of dispute, and the Ghost Rider comes out, and that's basically it. However, and like I said, 68 is the retelling of Johnny's origin with the priest in the confessional. Again, landmark issue for this series. It's a great issue. 69 is basically a drunk redneck goes crazy and tries to bulldoze the Quentin Carnival, and Johnny Blaze becomes Ghost Rider and stops him. And that basically, that's the gist of that. But I mean, but also at the same time, we're fleshing out a lot more of the characters of the Quentin Carnival. The Quentin Carnival is being fleshed out while minor little things like this are happening. And so is Johnny Blaze's fight against Zarathos taking over control and his dilemma. That's all being expanded upon while this happens. So issue 70 is where a bunch of freaks come to the Quentin Carnival to kidnap the Quentin Carnival's resident freak, Jeremy. Of course, their leader, his name is Ronaldo. He's a real slime bag. Ronaldo actually works for the Freakmaster, who has some ties to the Quentin Carnival, but we don't know about that yet. And of course, Ghost Rider beats up the freaks, soul fries Ronaldo, but Jeremy decides to voluntarily leave with the freaks because they live on this supposed island where it's like a paradise for freaks. 71 is a filler issue written by JM, and it's basically Ghost Rider takes on this evil demonic entity, I think Null, that the Defenders had fought at one time and beaten, and it's a pretty good fight, but I mean, other than that, not much interest. Okay, so 72 and issue 73 deal with the Circus of Crime. Now, the Circus of Crime is a minor D-level group of criminals in the Marvel Universe. I've always had a soft spot for them, but that's just me. And basically what they are is they set up the circus and they rob the people and get them to control them and get them to do bad things and just enrich themselves. Well, the clown of the Quentin Carnival, his son Elliot, comes to the Quentin Carnival after he gets released from prison. Elliot was the clown member of the Circus of Crime, and Elliot really wants to go straight. However, the Circus of Crime got rid of their former leader, the Ringmaster, and want Elliot to come back to be the clown and lead the Circus of Crime so they can go back to their robbing ways. There's the Fire Eater, there's the human cannibal guy, there's the two gymnasts, the Gambini guys, and then there's like Livewire, who has a electrified lasso. And they start staging accidents around the carnival, leaving secret messages for Elliot to find them, and so he'd come back and join. And eventually what happens is they set Elliot's dad's tent on fire. His dad gets hurt real bad, has to go to the hospital. Elliot can't afford the medical bills, so he becomes the clown again and decides to join the Circus of Crime. And at that point in time, the Circus of Crime decides to take over the Quentin Carnival and for their own nefarious purposes. Of course, Elliot really doesn't want to join the Circus of Crime, and he never intended to join the Circus of Crime. He pretended to so he can get his revenge on them for what they did to his dad. So Elliot rallies the Quentin Carnival people to fight back against the Circus of Crime. And Johnny Blaze, who had been captured at that point and didn't know Elliot was actually a good guy, gets free, turns into the Ghost Rider, while there's this big battle going on between the Quentin Carnival people and the Circus of Crime. And of course the Ghost Rider shows up and all hell breaks loose. And the Circus of Crime is easily beaten, but in the ensuing bedlam, Ghost Rider fries Elliot's soul. Elliot doesn't even bother trying to reason with him. He's like, oh my god, this guy's crazy. Because, you know, the only one who knows that Johnny Blaze is the Ghost Rider is Red Fowler. Nobody else knows. And so this has a very profound effect on Johnny when he finds out what Elliot was really up to. And so Johnny kind of, for an issue, leaves the Quentin Carnival to go clear his head. But it's a really good action-packed two-parter issues, and it just showcases the characters of the carnival, showcases the Circus of Crime, showcases Johnny's ongoing battle with Zarathos. At this point in time, Zarathos is able to have mental manifestations of himself that Johnny Blaze can see, begging to be let free, and it's really starting to bother Johnny. Issue 74, what we're looking at now, is Johnny leaves, goes on a little road trip to Louisiana, and he meets up with Centurious. Of course, we don't know Centurious's role in anything right now. He just occupies an old mansion in Louisiana filled with people whose souls he has sucked into the soul crystal. He has possession of the soul crystal. And he just has them, you know, do their mockery of life type things, like, you know, tend the house and everything like that. Of course, Ghost Rider runs into him, and him and Centurious fight. When Centurious, you know, tries to take the soul of Johnny Blaze, but out comes the Ghost Rider. First, Centurious is startled, but then him and the Ghost Rider have a really good knockdown, drag-out fight. And in all honesty, Centurious wins the fight in a way, because Ghost Rider goes to like fry his soul, but he has no soul to fry. So it weakens Ghost Rider, and he's forced to turn back into Johnny Blaze, and Centurious can basically have his way with him when, you know, one of the servants that Centurious had kept around kind of betrays him and sets fire to the mansion, and everybody escapes and all the chaos. And there's a little epilogue that Centurious, you know, lived through the fire when you thought he died. At the time, it was seemingly an unimportant issue, an unimportant villain, but as we'll come to see later on, he's a big part of the Ghost Rider's lore and mythology and life, even into the second series. Very great issue, I have to say. Issue 75, we get introduced to Steelwind. She is another important character who we'll see later on in the second series. And basically, she's kind of almost like a human cyborg type thing, who works for Freakmaster, and she goes to the Quentin Carnival to go strong arm them into being taken over by Freakmaster, and her and Johnny Blaze get into it. Johnny Blaze challenges her to a race to see who can stay. She cheats to win. Of course, eventually he comes back to confront her about her misdeeds, and she gets into a fight with the Ghost Rider, and the Ghost Rider ends up, of course, beating her. This will be the last we see of Steelwind in this series. However, like I said, she will appear again in the second series and also the fourth series. Okay. Next up, as you see issue 76, you see another separated Johnny Blaze Ghost Rider battle. And basically, what happens is Mephisto is making his play now. And he has a bet with Asmodeus to see if they can play for a little game they're playing. And basically what it is Mephisto separates, he captures Johnny Blaze, separates the Ghost Rider from Johnny Blaze, tells them that they have to work together to get out of hell, and if they can get out of hell together, that they'll be separated and freed forever. So basically Blaze and Ghost Rider have to work together to get out of hell. Asmodeus is betting that they won't make it out, or that they will make it out. I can never remember. Mephisto basically doesn't tell Asmodeus what the penalty is if he loses the bet. Asmodeus loses the bet, and Mephisto kills Asmodeus, and that's the last you ever see of Asmodeus. However, of course, Ghost Rider and Johnny Blaze make it out together, but Mephisto tricks them, and so they're back together, same, joined, like they've always been. But you see that Mephisto, he gives away a little bit about the history of the Ghost Rider. So as you can see, issue 77 and 78 are a two-parter. And that is where Nightmare comes, and he invades the subconscious of Johnny Blaze and speaks to the Ghost Rider and starts telling him his origin. While all this is going on, Ronaldo is back with a whole bunch new of freaks to try and kill Johnny Blaze and take over the Quentin Carnival. And basically, in the end, what happens is Ghost Rider Zarathos finds out his origin. Johnny Blaze beats Ronaldo, and Ghost Rider and Johnny Blaze beat Ronaldo one last time. And Nightmare doesn't get his wishes as far as what he really ultimately wanted, but he never really lost either. It's a real good two-parter as well, because you have those three different things going on, and while you have Johnny Blaze in the Nightmare world trying to race out of it, confronting his past, you have Zarathos learning about his past, and you have the whole Ronaldo trying to take over the Quentin Carnival again. Again, another great two-parter issue, and you know, like I said, it's just a shame that this book would get canceled at this point in time. Issue 79, Murdered by Man Cycle, is the Freak Master. Shows himself as being the one behind Ronaldo and all the trouble, and him trying to take over the Quentin Carnival. And basically, he's the son of freaks who Quentin abused really bad, and led to their deaths a long time ago. So Freak Master does take over the carnival, but Freak Master has plans to turn every major carny there into a freak through surgical means. But you know, Johnny Blaze finds this out, turns into the Ghost Rider, stops the evil plans, and the Quentin Carnival can go on. But as soon as that is done with, Roxanne Simpson shows up in issue 80. And she begs him, she says she's been looking for him for a while, and she begs him, she wants him to come with her back to her hometown of Holly. Something weird is going on there. She needs help, and of course, she knows he's the Ghost Rider, and she's the only one he's the only one she can turn to. So, because she has other family members that live in Holly, and they're being affected by whatever weird is going on. Well, what's going on is that there's this preacher named the Sin Eater. And he's having his sermons and preaching all the time. And whenever he preaches to people one-on-one, they become, excuse me, like soulless, compliant people. All happy, no problems, kind of like mindless drones. And of course, Roxanne's younger cousin goes to confront the guy, and they have a talk, and then later on after the talk, the cousin comes out, and he's all happy and content, and yes, the Sin Eater was right. He ate my sins and took it away. Now I can live in peace. Well, of course, that doesn't sound right to anybody with a rational brain. So finally, the Sin Eater's having church one day, and Johnny Blaze decides to test his dare, and the Sin Eater calls up anybody who would doubt him to come on up, and he'll heal him of his sins and forgive him and everything like that. And of course, Johnny Blaze does that with Roxanne watching, and the Sin Eater sucks out the soul of Johnny Blaze, and out comes Zarathos, the Ghost Rider, who's more than happy to come out and cause havoc, and is so joyful. But we learn about the whole time that Centurious makes another appearance. He was behind the Sin Eater the whole time. After their little skirmish in Louisiana, Centurious remembered his past really well to dwell on, and remembered that Ghost Rider is actually Zarathos and was the cause of his life of torment for all these, couple thousand years or 100 years, wherever, and he wants revenge upon him. So they get into this big battle, and basically Centurious wins. Without the soul of Jonathan Blaze, who Johnny Blaze's soul is sucked into the soul crystal, Zarathos becomes weaker and weaker and can't sustain himself. And Centurious is a lot more stronger now because he's been using the souls to boost his power, and because he's control of elemental magics and stuff like that. And he kind of really, Ghost Rider gets a few good licks in, but he kind of whips the floor with the Ghost Rider. So, in the end, Roxanne, in order to free and save Johnny, helps the Ghost Rider, Zarathos, and in the end, Zarathos confronts Centurious. Centurious is basically laughing at him, and Ghost Rider does something. He busts open the soul crystal, and all the souls that had been collected go back to their rightful owner, which includes Johnny Blaze, and Centurious gets sucked into the soul crystal. Well, Zarathos, infuriated that his mortal foe has gotten away from him, starts going on a real rampage, just full on pissed. So the Sin Eater offers to send Zarathos' soul into the soul crystal to go and fight Centurious basically for all eternity. And Zarathos agrees to it, so hating Centurious. And so the Sin Eater, with his dying breath, sends Zarathos' soul into the soul crystal. Johnny Blaze is freed from the curse of the Ghost Rider. He leaves off with Roxanne to go live a life together, and the soul crystal at the very last panel shows the soul crystal being sucked into the ground, and Mephisto grabbing it, looking at it and laughing. And inside the soul crystal you can see Centurious and Zarathos fighting each other while Mephisto laughs. A fabulous, although abrupt end to a great book. I remember when the book got canceled, I was very upset. I couldn't believe it. Especially after this last run, which was so good. And, God only knows what would have happened if they had given the book more time. Because this book was really getting good. It just, even though it had very few superhero type stuff in it, it was just, the story was just getting good. They were progressing it. Unlike Fleischer, who kind of let it stagnate, they were progressing it, progressing the side characters, introducing new things to it, and so forth. And you really felt, and you got to know the members of the Quentin Carnival, and the villains were a little bit more dimensional, and gave Ghost Rider a little bit more run for his money, and and so forth. However, like I said, some years down the road, when the second series comes around, Zarathos, Johnny Blaze, Centurious, Steelwind, of course Nightmare and Mephisto, and the Sin Eater, even the town of Holly, all come back. It's not like the second series would ignore everything that happens in this series, as sometimes continuity in comics, that kind of thing happens. The second series, even though Johnny Blaze is not the Ghost Rider in that series, the second series uses a lot of this last arc run and sets up a basis for a lot of things later on down the road in that series. And so a lot of this stuff makes an appearance. And I'll get into that more when I cover that series. So that is the final run of the Ghost Rider first series that ended with issue 81. I've kind of told you what I thought overall about the series. And this may not be the best or most consistent of all the Ghost Rider series, but it is one that as a kid I grew up on and had an impression with. The striking images, as you can see before you, are something when you're 8, 9, 10 years old, you see that, you're immediately drawn to it. And kudos to Marvel for sticking with the book as long as they did, because the book's not going to sell like gangbusters. As a matter of fact, this book has no seminal Marvel events that you can think of. There is no Green Goblin killing Gwen Stacy. There is no Masters of Evil taking over the Avengers mansion. There's just no Wolverine getting his adamantium taken out of him by Magneto. There's just no seminal moment in comic books history that comes from this series. As a matter of fact, the only really remembered moments from non-fans really of this series are the Goose, the issue 10 misprint, and the fact that Jesus Christ basically made an appearance in a Marvel comic book. As far as I know, that's the only comics I've ever heard of where Christ basically appeared. Even though they didn't say he was Christ, he is basically who they implied he was. So I think this Ghost Rider series is known more for that type of thing than any seminal moment in comic books history. But to the Ghost Rider fan, you know, it's a great series. All the writers contributed in one way or another. All the artists contributed in one way or another. Although there are standouts with the art and the writing, especially Michael Fleischer, I think, and of course J.M. DeMatteis and Roger Stern. Their runs, the book got better later into its run, but it just wasn't good enough to save it. And it's a shame. But they did wrap it up. It didn't end abruptly, like out of the blue, for the most part. They wrapped it up, got the storylines wrapped up, and Johnny Blaze got a happy ending. And that was really all you can ask for. Like I said, if I had to pick, if you don't have the money, if you are interested in Ghost Rider, the first series, you can find a lot of issues real cheap. And the first series is definitely kind of where you want to start. If you have the money to get the whole collection, great. If you don't, I would suggest starting at issue 68 and working my way to issue 81. Because that would give you a lot. Basically, it tells you the history of Ghost Rider, tells you the history of Johnny Blaze, sets up the Quentin Carnival and all these other characters that will appear later on in the second series. If you have a little bit more money, I would go back. I would actually work my way back from issue 68 and try to get all the Michael Fleischer issues, because his run on the book, while had its problems, is really, really good and set the template for what Stern and J.M. DeMatteis did. Okay, well, that is my conclusion to the first series of Ghost Rider. Next time, we're going to be looking at the second series, The Age of Heroes for the 90s. So I hope you enjoyed it. And until then, I will tell you, have fun.